Hi, this video is about 6 niche level designer scents. Now, I usually don't like to talk about niche versus designer because it's really a stupid definition that we've given fragrances. But I'm going to humor myself and you and talk about 6 designer fragrances that I think are niche quality. It's probably the best title I can give it to describe what I'm about to present. Now, a lot of the time, the more popular niche scents are not reinventing the wheel when it comes to smells. They're just making it with better quality ingredients and probably a higher concentration of perfume oils. There are some niche fragrances that are doing things that are unique, but they're not so popular. This, by the way, is a countdown. So I'm going from 6 to 1. Now this video comes courtesy of my favorite author, Tiger Mask, and my favorite book, which is called Axioms and Digressions. And I'll leave a link in the description. Please buy it. I've made well over 100 videos on YouTube, and I don't think I've ever once asked anybody to subscribe to my channel, but I will ask you, if you could, buy the book. And what does Tiger Mask say in this quote? He says, "Industry manufactures the poison and the cure, and you will buy them both." And now before we jump into this video, I need to tell you the story of bread. Yes, it has one. And it's super relevant to what I've observed in the world of fragrance. Bread for over 14,000 years was a staple food for many parts of the world. Discovered by accident when the then nomadic tribes would spend time to make this treat by removing the husks, milling the cereals with a stone, mixing it with water, and eventually fermenting it, and then keeping it near a fire to bake it. Amazing if you think that they were doing this 14,000 years ago. And it's been like that for a long time. The way bread was made remained unchanged for the bulk of the last 14,000 years. But something changed when bread became a business. Because before it was a business, every family would make their own dough with their own flour and water and take it to the neighborhood baker. Because people didn't have ovens in their homes. So there was a town baker who would bake all of your food for a fee, and each family would put their own logo on the dough so that the baker knew whose bread was whose. Eventually, people did get ovens in their homes, and still bread was made in the same way. The same way I'm referring to is the milling of the wheat with the germ. The germ is the part of the wheat with all the nutrients in it. The oils, the fiber, the vitamins, they're all in the germ. Add to that, the once milled wheat is then combined with water. It was left to ferment. Yes, most non-flat breads were in fact sourdoughs. This added a whole new element of probiotic to the nutritional profile of bread. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that one could just eat bread and get most of the nutrition that they actually needed to live. In comes industry, and they want to make bread for a profit as a business. Now, the best way to do that successfully is by utilizing economies of scale, which is, baking bread in bulk to reduce the cost and make profit by sheer volume. Now, when you make things in volume and the consumption doesn't match it, you'll need something called shelf life. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of waste and you're not going to actually make the profit that you want as a business. Now, a concept of shelf life, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with that concept here. At the time, traditional bread had a shelf life of about 2 days, which is really not enough to make a profit with. Bread would normally go as hard as a brick after about 2 days, and it's one of the main reasons why people in ye olden times broke their teeth, because it was on old bread. Now, I mentioned how the germ is the nutritional bit of the wheat, but the bad thing about that is because all the oils are in the germ. If you kept that in the bread that you make, the bread goes rancid pretty quickly. The oils go rancid, so it makes the bread go rancid. And this affects the shelf life. Now, what did industry do? Of course, they got rid of the wheat germ. And doing this meant that the milled flour had a shelf life of like ages, years. Great, isn't it? Also, industry decided that the fermentation process took too long, so they replaced that with baker's yeast to speed things up. They also bleached the flour to make it white because, well, that's a whole nother topic. So now industry has a product which is still called bread, but it's very far removed from what actual bread is and from what people are used to eating. In comes the old working classes who, because they're working now, don't have time to bake their own bread, so they buy it from a shop and eat it like it was actual bread. And what happened? Well, people got sick. That's what happened. They were expecting nutrients, but they never received it. They became malnourished. They became sick. They became vitamin deficient whilst paying for the thing that was the reason for their deteriorating health. They were paying for their poison. And what did industry do? Well, they came to the rescue, of course, by selling you the vitamins that you are deficient of. Now you are buying the so-called bread and the vitamins too. Some manufacturers even re-injected the vitamins they had taken out of bread back into the bread and charged you extra for it. The industry makes both the poison and the cure, and you will buy them both. You still here? Good. Now I'll tell you what this has to do with fragrances. Back before there was this commonly referred to term as niche fragrances, there were only fragrances, and the bulk of them are from what we now term as designers. Perfumery was not easy to break into, it wasn't cheap, and as the market for it matured, it was treated more like an art form to complement a designer's aesthetic rather than the mass market entry point cash cow product. There was no such thing as discounters, but if you knew the perfume shop owner, he would sell you the testers from underneath the counter for a little bit cheaper. And there just weren't that many fragrances around. But as the market grew, the techniques used to create these fragrances became cheaper. Manufacturing costs decreased, and it made it easier to create more products. Fragrances at scale, always cheaper and cheaper. And it's no secret that over time, all the releases from these so-called designer houses have become increasingly uninspired and lackluster and lacking any artistic vision, and not curated by an artisan, but instead by an accountant and a marketing analyst, the exact two kinds of people that I don't want anywhere near my fragrances. Now, you might just say, well, Rafi, that's just art imitating life. Well, actually, you're not saying that. I'm saying that. And the reason I'm saying that is to plant that seed into your mind. So more and more fragrances getting cheaper and cheaper, flatter smelling with decreasing performance, sillage, and complexity. And the worst part, they all kind of smell the same. And what did people do? They started buying niche fragrances. That's what they did. The fragrance lovers of the world, of whom there seemed to be more than I would have thought, wanted more. So niche perfume houses became increasingly popular, no doubt to make up for the gap left by these woeful designer releases. And what did the designers do? They started releasing artistically masterful perfumes of exquisite quality. Just kidding, they didn't do that. They actually bought a lot of the niche perfume houses. That's what they did. So those niche perfume houses, the ones that have the nice marketing, they're owned by the same multinational conglomerates that own the designers. The industry manufactures the poison and the cure, and you will buy them both. However, once in a while they slip up and let go of an absolute masterpiece of high quality creativity. And I'm going to tell you about 6 of them, counting down from number 6. Bulgari's Man Black Orient. Yes, Man in Black is a decent designer scent, but Black Orient is just that much better. It's richer and deeper and darker with the addition of cardamom, rose and oud, and the subtraction of tonka. Yes, I'm giving it points for removing tonka. I feel that tonka and vanilla are being done to death these days. Every single release that I hear about that's garnering rave reviews from everybody else is chock full of this vanilla tonka, vanilla tonka, vanilla tonka, and henceforth no longer exceptional enough to be special, except for one of the fragrances later in this list. Super high quality stuff here, and I'm super sad at its discontinuation. But hey, them's the breaks. Vintage Quorum by Antonio Puig. Not Puig, Puig. Okay, stay with me here. I don't think that this fragrance was ever intended to be a high-end perfume. But back when it was released in 1981, there was only one thing to aspire to in men's perfumery, and that was powerhouse. This thing has stuff in here like oak moss. Yes, real oak moss, not tree moss. Artemisia, which is bitter and herbal. And although it's not in the note listing, dog shit. Yes, There's a fecal element in here, but it fades away in the opening, luckily. Now, I didn't think I'd like this one as much as I do, but holy hell, this is great. This is the kind of stuff that Tom Ford borrows from to make his new retro-feeling masculines. It's still quite easy to find, but you need to have the vintage because the ingredients list on this one reads like the list of banned substances that IFRA has put out. There's been a few reformulations of this, but as long as you get the one with the thick line on the bottle and not the thin line, focus, there it is. It's a thick line, not a thin line, under where it says quorum. And if you've only got pictures of the box, I'll fucking put the box. And if you've only got pictures of the box, look for the short ingredients list on the back of the box because that's going to be the telltale sign. So if you have the thick line and the short ingredients list, you're going to be good. This is definitely not a blind buy, but it's cheaper than a Big Mac meal, so it's not a huge investment. Hey, there's no rule that says that niche fragrances have to be expensive to be niche. Quorum is absolutely beast mode, and the one word that describes this best is unforgiving. It kind of reminds me of the old Italian coffee machine that we have at my office. Now, if you don't know what you're doing with it, it will just give you muddy water. But once you learn its nuances, it's going to give you the best cup of coffee you've ever tasted in your life. And one more thing to add is that the word quorum means the minimum number of people required at a meeting to come to a decision. But what they don't tell you is, if you're wearing vintage quorum, you're the one making the decisions. Yope, what about Adam? Okay, I have a confession to make. I'm as pretentious as they come, to the point that I have to try so hard to not be a snob that it makes me really tired, and I don't have enough energy to actually be a snob. It kind of works out. So, Yope, eh? For the record, I hate Yope Homme. Really hate Yope Homme. I have a vintage tester here, and I can actually smell it through the glass. That's how potent this shit is. And let me just have a sniff. I got it on my fingers. Oh, bloody hell. That's never coming off. That's never gonna come off. Now I got tattooed Yope Homme on my fingers. Yuck. Well, since it's on my fingers, let me give it a sniff. And it's just as horrible as I remember it was in the 90s. And I can't believe that Michel Almerac created this abomination. This juice was created by Michel Almerac. And to put things into perspective, Michel Almerac also made this. This is Gucci Pour Homme, my most favorite fragrance of all time. And I can't believe that this and this were made by the same guy. I don't know how that's possible. But guess what? Yope doesn't give a flying fuck. They never have. And that's what I like about them. It's such a breath of fresh air. And on principle, I'm glad that Yope Homme is still around, even though it's been reformulated to death and it's no longer as potent and it certainly doesn't smell as good or as bad as it used to. It's kind of like when a bad guy gets old and he's not so bad anymore. It's like this bad but weak guy. What's the point? I should also point out that Yope is technically a niche brand since 2005 because the fragrance and cosmetic arm of the brand is wholly owned by Coty. However, because What About Adam over here was made in the 90s, it's technically still a designer because back then the business was still owned by Wolfgang Yope and his business partner, and they mainly made clothing. So it's allowed to be in this list. Anyway, What About Adam, hey? Let's have a sniff. Tomato leaf, mint, and by modern measures, a very toned down vanilla in the base. Now on paper, it doesn't sound like it should work, but oh my god, this is amazing. On your skin and in the air, it's this feeling of the warmest and sunniest of days right after you've called in sick for work. Truth is, if this bottle didn't have Yope written on it, if it had something else like Serjoff or Parfums de Marly or even Creed written on it, then I wouldn't have to try to convince you that it was worthy of the hype. But labels matter. Image matters, so does pricing. This fragrance got discontinued so quickly it should have been called What About What? It absolutely tanked in sales, and pretty soon you could find it in the $20 bargain basement bin category. This fragrance is like that video of the violinist. There's this violinist, one of the best violinists in the world. His name was Joshua Bell. Back in 2007, he did an experiment with a group, and he put on a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap, and then he took his Stradivarius violin, which is the most exquisite violin and one of the most expensive violins in the world, his. And he went to a metro station in Washington to play. And he played some of the most exquisite classical music for over an hour. Now, they were filming this, and there's a video of it somewhere on YouTube if you search for Joshua Bell. And out of the 1,097 people that passed by, only 27 gave money, and only 7 stopped to listen for a little while. Now, this guy would usually make more than 5 figures plus for a performance of that length. And on this gig, he made $52.17, and 20 of those dollars came from one person who actually recognized him. Labels matter. Image matters. Context matters. We're narrative-driven creatures, and we need to be able to tell a cohesive story that fits our preconceived notions. And when reality doesn't fit our narrative of the world, we will do any amount of cognitive gymnastics to make sure it does. In a world increasingly all about that creed, all about amouage, all about Killian, what about Joop? What about Adam? This is Mercedes-Benz Club Black. Well, this one came out of nowhere. Pretty sure I mentioned my dislike of that whole vanilla tonka thing that's been ramping up in recent times. Remember that? Well, this is the exception to the rule. And in order for me to like that vanilla tonka, you get the point. It must mean it's ridiculously good. If you're gonna do vanilla, you need to go all in. Balls deep. That's what Club Black has done. It's such a deep and resinous and smoky vanilla. This, number 1, is a beast mode projector, and number 2 is a longevity monster, and number 3 is a compliment magnet. And the reason why it's on this list? Well, anything that gets routinely mistaken for Spiritueuse Double Vanille by Guerlain automatically makes this list. And now we're getting to the home stretch. Number 2 on this countdown is Dior Homme Parfum. No surprises here. The famous iris is there, but it's not the star player here, I think, as it is in Dior Homme and Dior Homme Intense. It's leather actually, and it's a dark rose that's there supporting it, and the smell of something that was on fire, something expensive that was on fire. Just to give you a brief timeline, in 2005 we have Dior Homme arriving on the scene with the silver stem. In 2007 we have Dior Homme Intense with the silver collar. In 2011, both Dior Homme and Dior Homme Intense get reformulated because Demachy, who created the juice, was out because Dior wanted to keep their formulas in-house, and so they brought them in and they reformulated them. They did a pretty good job. And in 2014, Dior Homme and Dior Homme Intense got reformulated again, and this is around December, I think, when the formula numbers changed. And 2014 is when Dior Homme Parfum was released as well, which also lists Demachy as the creator, which I think is a bit weird. I love spraying this on my leather jacket. Leather on leather with rose and iris. Top-notch quality and extremely beast mode. Like beast mode, beast mode, beast mode. I don't know how many times I gotta say it to get it through. Beast mode times a million. It is not discontinued. It has not been reformulated either. Now, the words I'd use to describe this is mysterious and confident and powerful. And for the person who not only is the embodiment of the words that I just mentioned, but also more than meets the eye. And the last fragrance on this list is none other than Opium Eau De Parfum. This is a phenomenon in a bottle. Now, this is technically classed as an oriental spicy fragrance, It's been reformulated 3 times. This here is the second reformulation with the refillable bottle. And after this, it went to a clear bottle that looks more like the EDT bottles. And it was eventually discontinued in 2018. Once you spray this on, it starts off like, what the fuck? It's almost eucalyptus-like, and it's medicinal, and it takes forever to get to the mid, like at least an hour. The performance well, I'm at a loss for words. Let me explain what happened. I put about 3 sprays of this on my forearm one evening just to smell it go through its motions, right? And later that evening, I went to bed and I could still smell it. It was still projecting. The next morning, I woke up and I could still smell it. It was still projecting. And then I thought, well, later in the afternoon, we're about to go out. And I thought, well, this has probably died down. So I sprayed the same amount of Dior Homme Parfum over the top of it. And after we came back from going out, I thought I'd smell Dior Homme Parfum just to smell that and how that's developing. But instead of Dior Homme Parfum, I got Opium Pour Homme with Dior Homme Parfum in the background. Now, we know that Dior Homme Parfum is a beast mode fragrance, but what the hell are you supposed to call this? I mean, it was 20 hours after spraying it on and having Dior Homme Parfum over the top of it, and I could still smell this. It just blows my mind. And this bottle is from 2008, and it hasn't been stored in the ideal conditions. It's incredible. It's enormous. And anyway, back to the scent itself. It doesn't feel like it's ever settled down. Like there's this extreme level of class in this fragrance. And it's got elegance and sophistication when you get to the mid. But because of the cassis, it never really feels like it's settled. It remains energetic. It never actually gives up to the vanilla that's in here. The cassis plays with the Tolu balsam, whilst the vanilla is just the voyeur. What the fuck am I talking about? If the original Opium from 1977 was a beast, then this is the beast in a suit, but with a velvet smoking jacket. If the original Opium was the prototype, then this is the finished product. The flagship, the greatest in its genre. Too bad it's dead. And in my view, so is this no fucks given kind of perfumery. Not from designers anyway. Maybe once in a blue moon we'll get us a Gucci Guilty Absolute or a Moschino Toy Boy. But that area now is designated for niche perfumes and indie perfumeries. Maybe, just maybe, one day designers will be like, hey, you know what? Let's start making artistically creative, high quality, banging fragrances again. Maybe they'll be like, let's make it exclusive instead of mass market. Let's make it aligned to this season's collection while staying true to the brand's aesthetic. Let's allow artistic perfumers and creative directors to play together again to make olfactory icons. And when they do, it'll be the best thing since bread.